But listen, if Bayern are the flagship, then the flagship has lost its flag because they're just not very good.
Right.
And I'm actually interested. You know, Kovac just seems to be taking some stick. And I agree with Rafa. You know, as far as experience is concerned, Kovac doesn't have it. But what's going on with the two guys sitting up in the tower? Uli Hoeneß and Rummenigge.
Rummenigge, yeah.
You know, they're the ones that are supposed to be giving their manager or their coach a team to put on the field, and then they're criticising Kovac for setting the team up the way he did. What else was he supposed to do? These two guys have given him a back line that can't run. So you can't go against a team like Liverpool and go all out and attack. You have to be cautious. So these two guys, for me, seem to be getting away with an awful lot.
Rafa, do you agree?
To an extent, yes. I don't necessarily agree that the back four is that bad. I think that's been overplayed. It comes to collective defending. I don't think Matip is necessarily a better centre-back than Hummels, Boateng or Süle, and you can cope with that. But the issue is they made a mistake. They made a mistake of thinking the squad was going to be good enough and Kovac was going to be good enough. And let's not forget, he is there because the guys that they really wanted, they couldn't get. First Jupp Heynckes, who refused to stay on, then Thomas Tuchel, who decided PSG offer is better than a theoretical offer from Bayern that might never arrive. So Kovac is there because the guys they did want, they didn't get, and he might still be there because they still can't get the guys that they might want. So you can blame them for that, I think rightly, in not seeing the bigger picture and putting themselves in a position where they ended up with a squad and a manager where they feel it's actually not quite good enough. But the big change, at least on the squad side, is going to come in the summer.
It's only 6 years, let's face it, less than 6 years since an all-German Champions League final. And the year after that, Germany won the World Cup. Do you read what many people are reading into this with the Bundesliga or not?
On the one hand, I do believe that a lot of these things are cyclical. And it, as you're seeing with the English clubs, and fans of those clubs are now recognising. But at the same time, you look at Bayern and their squad, and you have to be concerned with, as much as you understand an ageing squad and you wanted to have a certain sense of loyalty to that squad, you saw the likes of AC Milan do something similar not so long ago, it seems, and how they have kind of struggled ever since. You don't feel that Bayern are going to go that bad, but you just wonder if you know, history is repeating itself here.
And we all watched the German national team at the World Cup in Russia and thought, well, that's a one-off. But is there deep-seated concern?
Well, I think there's got to. I mean, let's just talk about Bayern Munich for a few seconds. To me, there was two aspects to the game. Number one, they were terrified of Liverpool on the fast break. And two, when they had possession of the ball, how do you nullify the opposition? How do you nullify Liverpool? You keep possession of the ball. And what they didn't have players that were technical enough and brave enough, A, to keep the ball and pass the ball around, to get to Lewandowski. Lewandowski was isolated. He looked as though he had no legs in him anymore. So the aspects of the game tells me that this Bayern Munich side needs to be absolutely overhauled completely, because I totally disagree with Raf. I think that the back four, if I'm looking at Hummels and the lad alongside him, I'm telling the lads to get me the ball, whether it's to feet or spin over the top, because I think I could have a lot of fun that day. So I think that back four is a little bit wanted.
Final thoughts, Raf?
Well, I think there are obviously issues, and they didn't perform all that well. But let's not forget that this Bayern team, I think, is still a Guardiola team in many ways. I mean, Javi Martinez, James, Thiago, these are not counter-attacking players. So you have possession players, but then you had a team set up with huge spaces in between midfield and attack. And Kovac wanted his players to be really, really wide, so they were completely isolated and played wonderfully into Liverpool's hands. So I think the basic idea of Kovac was exposed as being far too limited and one-dimensional. And Bayern need to figure out, you know, can we actually make up that distance that we have, because we don't have necessarily superstar players. Can we make up the distance playing that kind of football with this kind of team? And the answer has to be no. So something's got to change, either on the team side, on the coaching side, or best of all, on both.
Well, as they love to say, now they can concentrate on the league. Bayern Munich and Borussia Dortmund locked together at the top of the Bundesliga on 57 points. Bayern take on Mainz on Sunday. Dortmund A tricky-looking trip to Hertha Berlin the day before. Now, in case you missed the news, the Champions League still belongs to Ronaldo and Messi. A decade plus on. Mark Ogden writing about it today in ESPN FC.com. Go and read that column. The headline writers, of course, agreeing. Around Europe, all the Spanish headlines focusing on Messi's performance in Barcelona's 5-1 second leg victory over Lyon. The night before, of course, it was Ronaldo, his hat-trick, taking care of business, taking care of Atletico Madrid. And former teammate, actually, of Cristiano Ronaldo in a very public WhatsApp exchange, which Patrice Evra actually released. This was Evra going backwards and forwards with Ronaldo before the game. Ronaldo managed to get a selfie into the exchange, of course, somehow. But Evra releasing that after Ronaldo's exploits. And then Lionel Messi weighing in, saying what Cristiano and Juventus did on Tuesday was impressive. It was a big surprise. I thought Atletico would be a lot stronger, but Juventus were all over them. And Cristiano had a magical night. As of the time we tape the show, no response yet from Cristiano Ronaldo with a quote on Messi. Maybe that will be forthcoming. Don't hold your breath. But odds to win the Champions League now. We're down to the final 8. Manchester City stay favourites. Barcelona and Juventus just behind them. 10-3. Juventus 4-1. Liverpool at 5-1. And of course, now all eyes turn to the draw for that quarter-final. Raf, we asked you to come up with what would your dream draw be in the quarter-final. What did you go with and why?
Hot balls and cold balls at the ready.
Yeah.
I mean, just for a bit of fun, I thought Manchester Derby would be quite interesting.
Okay.
At this point, I really like the idea of two of the younger teams, if you will, coming up against each other with Spurs and Ajax.
Also, the expected reaction from the German press. You don't even need a translation, do you? All sorts of references to Deutsch disaster and debacle. Raf Honigstein is joining us. The German media, Raf, is seemingly taking this pretty well by what we're looking at. What's your sense of the reaction overall in Germany to Bayern's ouster?
Well, you know, Bayern are the flagship of German football, and if Bayern can't really register any meaningful chances against a Liverpool team that didn't even look all that impressive, I thought they were impressive in the sense that they were mature, efficient, controlled, but didn't seem to have to play at 100% to overcome a Bayern team that by the end of the tie looked very lost and helpless. So that was always going to reflect on everyone else. And because Bayern were the last team left in the Champions League, with Dortmund and Schalke already being eliminated with high margins of goals, there was extra pressure on them to perform. And I think the temptation is an obvious one, especially in the media, to make this a big story about German football being quite poor. And of course it does ring true to a certain extent, but I think you have to always look at individual clubs involved and try to resist the temptation to jump to too big conclusions. To give you an example, no one's going to say now that Dutch football is suddenly better than Spanish football because Ajax knocked out Real Madrid, or that Italian football has overtaken Spanish football with Juve knocking out Atletico. So we have to look at the clubs involved, but the bottom line is that German football, represented by Bayern, by the national team, at the very top, has lost a little bit of its luster over the last 5 years, and no one can deny that.
But Raf, sticking specifically with Bayern Munich, how has this happened? How have they deteriorated at this point? Because they have plenty of money to spend, am I right? They have the money to compete with the true big boys.
They're always amongst the top 4, top 5 when it comes to turnover, so the money's there. This year, remember, they didn't spend any money. They actually had a net transfer plus because they saved all the money for the big transition that's going to come next season. And that perhaps is already the genesis of some of the problems, that they thought they would be able to handle that transition without losing as much quality, with still being competitive in the league and in the Champions League. In the league, they still are. In the Champions League, I think they were shown up for being way off the mark when it comes to competing with the best team. And the whole construct, a team that wasn't freshed up enough this year, and a coach who is very inexperienced, has never been in Champions League before, was shown up a little bit by Jurgen Klopp, that was, the combination was too much. And if you want to have a bigger conversation, and this is where we go back to German football, the trend has been going downwards ever since Guardiola has left. They're buying little by little on the player side, with players getting a bit older and new players perhaps not quite be the same level, and also on the coaching side, have left that little bit extra specialness that they had, which made them regular semi-final contenders. And that deterioration, that regression, was brutally exposed by Liverpool yesterday night.
What is next for Bayern? Where do they go from here? You talked about them perhaps living in a red and white make-believe fantasy world for a lot of this year in your article. So how do they address this? Do they address these obvious flaws?
Well, I think it starts with being honest. It starts with being honest about the problems that they have in the squad, the mistakes that they made. I mean, going into a season with Rafinha being the only backup left back or right back, like he did last year. Remember when he made a big mistake against Real Madrid in the semi-final, really came back to haunt them. So decisions at the top were wrong. Transition of the squad needs to be stepped up. And crucially, they need to understand what it is that we actually want to do. They benefited from a vision and from a philosophy over the last few years, starting with Van Gaal, then with Heinkes, then with Guardiola, and they were buying players to fit into that. Right now, we don't really know what this new Bayern team is supposed to look like, because in Kovac, we have a defensive, very cautious manager who seems a misfit with the kind of football that Bayern have been playing recently. So if they keep just adding good players, but don't really have a firm idea under Kovac of what's going to happen, the money's not going to help. So they really need to figure out, is he the right guy? And if yes, what is the kind of football we want for next season? And they have to buy accordingly. And right now, and this is why I was talking about the make-believe world, right now, I don't see enough hard questions being asked by the board. I see a lot of people thinking, we're going to be fine, everything's going to be okay. And I'm a bit worried that all that money, a little bit like Man United, you know, who looked so much better until 5-6 years ago, that they will lose their way a little bit. And I think that's a very real danger.
Guys, no Bundesliga.